March 23, 1951. Basement beneath 327 Lenox Avenue, Harlem. 11:47 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked in alone. 12 armed men were waiting. By morning, only one person left that building alive. The basement smelled like wet concrete and old tobacco. A single bare bulb hung from a wire, casting harsh shadows across exposed brick walls. Water stains marked the floor where pipes had leaked for years. There were no windows at ground level. Just two small openings near the ceiling showing nothing but darkness outside. 12 men stood in that room. Some leaned against walls. Others sat on overturned crates. All of them were armed. Revolvers tucked into waistbands. A shotgun propped against the brick. One man held a knife, turning it slowly in his hands. They had been waiting for 3 hours. At 11:47 p.m., they heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow. Measured. No hesitation. The door opened. Bumpy Johnson stepped inside. He wore a dark overcoat. Fedora hat. Hands visible at his sides. No weapon. He didn't look at the guns. Didn't look at the men holding them. He looked at the wooden table in the center of the room where a leather satchel sat unopened. No one spoke. Bumpy walked to the table. His footsteps were the only sound, heels striking concrete, echoing off brick walls. He reached the table. Stood there. Waited. One of the 12 men finally spoke. His name was Vincent Torres. He ran numbers on the east side. He'd been the one who called this meeting. "You're late," Vincent said. Bumpy didn't answer. Didn't turn around. Kept his eyes on the satchel. Vincent stepped forward. "You think you can walk in here alone? You think we won't? The money's not in the bag," Bumpy said. His voice was quiet. Conversational. The tone a man uses when stating a fact, not making a threat. Vincent stopped mid-sentence. The other 11 men shifted. Guns came out of waistbands. The man with the shotgun stood up straighter. "What did you say?" Vincent asked. "The money you're looking for," Bumpy said, still not turning around, still looking at the table. "It's not in that bag." "Then where is it?" "You already spent it." This moment mattered. Vincent and his crew had been skimming from Harlem's numbers racket for 8 months. Small amounts at first. Then larger. Then careless. They'd taken $47,000 that belonged to people who couldn't afford to lose it. Washerwomen, porters, janitors who played their numbers every week hoping for a break that never came. The Italian families downtown didn't care. The police didn't care. But Bumpy cared. Not because of the money. Because of what it meant when 12 men could rob an entire neighborhood and face no consequences. Vincent had called this meeting thinking Bumpy would negotiate. Would offer a deal. Would recognize that 12 armed men in a basement meant Bumpy's rules didn't apply tonight. He was wrong about that. "You got 5 seconds to tell me where our money is," Vincent said, raising his gun. "Or we start with your knees and work up." Bumpy finally turned around. Slowly. No sudden movements. His hands still visible. His face showing nothing, no fear, no anger, no calculation. Just attention. Like a man listening to the weather report. "Your money," Bumpy said, looking at Vincent, then at each of the other 11 men in turn. "Bought cars. Bought watches. Bought apartments for girls who don't love you. It's gone. You can't give it back." "So what?" Another voice from the left. A man named Eddie Ramos. "You think you're walking out of here? You think—" "I'm not here to walk out," Bumpy said. The room went silent. "I'm here," Bumpy continued, his voice still quiet, still conversational. "So you understand what happens next." Vincent laughed. Nervous energy trying to pass as confidence. "What happens next? You're alone. We got 12 guns. You got nothing. What exactly do you think happens?" Bumpy looked at him for 3 full seconds. Didn't blink. Didn't move. Just looked. Then he said, After tonight, the 12 of you will never be in the same room again. Some of you will leave Harlem. Some of you won't leave this basement. But all of you will remember this exact moment. When you had 12 guns and you chose wrong. Subscribe and leave a comment. The most important part of this story is still ahead. What happened in the next 4 hours was never fully documented. The police report filed on March 24, 1951, listed 11 deaths in the basement of 327 Lenox Avenue. Cause of death varied: gunshot wounds, blunt force trauma, one listed as undetermined. No arrests were made. Vincent Torres's body was found slumped against the brick wall, a single bullet wound to the chest. Eddie Ramos died from head trauma, his own gun lying 3 feet from his hand, unfired. The man with the shotgun never got a chance to use it, found dead near the door, neck broken. The other 8 died in what investigators could only describe as chaos. Shell casings from 5 different weapons. Blood spatter patterns suggesting the men had turned on each other. Defensive wounds on multiple bodies. But no clear narrative of who shot whom, or why, or in what order. The leather satchel on the table was empty. It had always been empty. Bumpy Johnson was seen walking north on Lenox Avenue at 6:15 a.m., hands in his pockets, overcoat clean, moving like a man coming home from night shift work. No blood. No weapon. No hurry. He stopped at a diner on 135th Street. Ordered coffee and eggs. Sat at the counter reading the morning paper. When the waitress asked if he'd heard about the shooting, he said he hadn't. Finished his breakfast. Left a $5 tip on a $2 meal. By noon, every numbers runner in Harlem knew what had happened. Not the details, those would remain unclear forever, but the outcome. 12 men had tried to force Bumpy Johnson into negotiating. 12 men had believed that guns and numbers created safety. 11 of them were wrong. This decision would affect everyone. The following week, $47,000 appeared. Not all at once. Not from one source. But it appeared. Envelopes left at church. Money orders sent to specific addresses. Cash delivered to the same washerwomen, porters, and janitors who had lost it in the first place. No one asked where it came from. No one investigated. The Italian families downtown heard what happened and decided Harlem was complicated in ways they didn't want to understand. The police filed their reports and closed the case. Unsolved. No suspects. Bumpy Johnson never spoke about that night. When people asked, and people did ask, carefully, indirectly, he would change the subject. Or leave the room. Or simply look at the person asking until they remembered why some questions don't need answers. But the story spread anyway. Not in newspapers. Not in police files. In the whispered conversations that happened in barbershops and bars, on stoops and in church basements. The story of how 12 men thought they could outgun Harlem's conscience and learned otherwise. The telling varied. Some versions said Bumpy had backup hidden in the shadows. Some said he'd poisoned them before they even gathered. Some said it was pure psychology, that he'd turned them against each other with nothing but words and patience. But everyone agreed on one detail. Bumpy Johnson had walked into that basement alone. And walked out alone. And the 12 men who thought numbers meant safety learned that some types of power don't count guns. This was the moment everyone would remember. 3 months after the basement, on a humid June evening, a young runner named Marcus Webb came to Bumpy with a problem. Someone was moving cocaine through Marcus's territory. Not a lot. Just enough to test whether anyone would respond. Marcus was 19 years old. He'd grown up watching his mother play the numbers, watching his father work 3 jobs, watching Harlem take everything and give back nothing. He'd started running for Bumpy because it was the only job that paid respect along with money. "What should I do?" Marcus asked. They were sitting on a bench in Morningside Park. Rush hour traffic on the street behind them. Kids playing baseball on the diamond down the hill. Normal Harlem evening sounds, laughter, arguments, music from open windows. Bumpy didn't answer right away. He watched a baseball game. A kid hit a grounder to short. The shortstop bobbled it, threw late to first. The runner was safe. "You know what happened in March?" Bumpy finally asked. Marcus nodded. Everyone knew. "You know why it happened?" Marcus hesitated. "Because they stole from the neighborhood." "No," Bumpy said. "They stole from the neighborhood for 8 months. That's not why it happened." "Then why?" "Because they thought 12 guns meant they didn't have to answer for it." Bumpy stood up, straightened his coat, looked at Marcus. "Cocaine's not numbers," he said. "Numbers give people hope. Makes them think next week might be different. Cocaine just takes. It doesn't build anything. Doesn't help anyone. Just takes. So what do I do?" "You already know." Marcus did know. He'd known before he asked. But he needed to hear it from Bumpy. Needed to understand that power wasn't about how many men you could gather in a basement. It was about what you chose to protect. The cocaine disappeared from Marcus's territory within a week. No violence. No confrontation. Just quietly stopped. The people who'd been testing the boundaries understood they'd been answered. And Marcus Webb continued running numbers in Harlem for the next 30 years. Never moved to cocaine. Never expanded into anything that took more than it gave. When people asked him why, when younger runners said he could make 10 times the money, he'd tell them about a June evening in Morningside Park. About how Bumpy Johnson had watched a kid bobble a grounder, and used that moment to explain what power actually meant. Share and subscribe. This is how stories like this survive. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968. Heart attack at Wells Restaurant on 7th Avenue. He was sitting at his regular table. Had just finished his regular order. Was drinking his regular coffee. His heart stopped and he went forward into the table and was dead before anyone could call an ambulance. He was 62 years old. The funeral was held at Abyssinian Baptist Church. Standing room only. People who hadn't been to church in decades showed up in their best clothes. Not because they thought Bumpy was a saint, but because they understood what he'd represented. A man who'd grown up with nothing. Who'd built power without permission. Who'd protected a neighborhood that no one else cared about. Who'd walked into a basement with 12 armed men and walked out because he understood something they didn't. Violence is easy. Control is hard. At the funeral, an old woman named Dorothy Williams stood up during the community testimony portion. She was 74 years old. Had worked as a housekeeper for 50 years. Played the numbers every week. In 1951, she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Someone stole my money." $40. That was 3 weeks' numbers bets. I thought it was gone forever. She paused. Looked at the closed casket. 2 weeks later, I got an envelope. No name on it. $40 inside. Plus interest. She sat down. Didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. After the funeral, people went back to their lives. The numbers racket continued. New runners replaced old runners. Harlem changed and stayed the same. But the basement story never died. Fathers told it to sons. Runners told it to new recruits. Not as instruction. As warning. The leather satchel from that night was never found. Some say Bumpy kept it empty as a reminder. Others say it was never about what was inside. It was about who understood that empty meant something when carried by the right person. Years later, when young men would ask old runners how to build power, the answer was always the same. You don't walk into a room with 12 guns and walk out alive by being the 13th gun. You walk out by being the reason guns don't matter. Bumpy Johnson never wrote his rules down. Never gave speeches. Never explained himself. He walked into a basement alone when 12 armed men expected him to negotiate. He walked out alone when the sun rose. That was the only explanation Harlem ever needed. The rest was silence.